for joining us today. All right, so first thing we'll talk about is just contacting former students. Remember to send them a letter. We recommend about 2 weeks before you do the interview or try to do the interview. So we are within that window if you can be of when you can begin doing that. April 1st is when the YOYO opens, and it remains open through June 30th. So go ahead and send that out. I will show you again where that is on our websites, and you can customize it any way that you want and get it to students however you want as well. Remember to please help us improve the contact information that we post. We get contact information from KDE, but they are getting their contact information from the district. So a lot of times that contact information can be very old. It can be something that was originally entered when a student entered kindergarten and not been updated in 12 or more years. So that's something you can work with us on for future years to get with your Infinite Campus coordinator or whoever is collecting that information and put a bug in their ear to please ask students to update their information before they exit school. Check your list early if possible. All of the students are listed already, and it is much easier for us to deal with any discrepancies that we encounter before the YOYO goes live on April 1st. As you can imagine, if a student needs to be assigned to a different district other than yours, they would not want to get that student assigned to them after all of their YOYO interviews are completed. And I'm sure you wouldn't want to either. So the earlier you let us know, the better. In many cases, we will need to coordinate with KDE on some of those students that we're not really sure what their status is. It's not like I don't trust you when you send them to me, but they do need to verify that someone has enrolled somewhere else before I can assign them to a different district or in some cases take them off. One of the things that we're pushing this year is the rather high population of students that are listed as being homeless. And we're recommending that you get with your LEA's homeless coordinator. I didn't even know every LEA had a homeless coordinator until we met with the state director of homelessness a few weeks ago, and she told us about this, and I thought, wow, what a great opportunity for YOYO interviewers who are having difficult times finding students that move around a lot. Maybe the district homeless coordinator can help them find them. Obviously, they're a year out of school, but they probably know some tips and tricks that you might use as well. Of course, you can talk to your Infinite Campus representative, your attendance clerk, whoever else as well, and whatever other methods you might have to get in touch with a former student. Oops. Are you having trouble accessing the system? We always get a lot of people saying, I did this before, but it's not letting me in this year. Well, remember that this year you will be required to retake the quiz, even if you've been an interviewer in the past, and some of you have probably already done that. We can tell you what your username is. We can't tell you what your password is because even we don't know that. But email Judy or myself, and we'll get your username to you if you can't remember it. And then you can reset the password as long as you have your correct email address associated with it. And of course, you need to be assigned a role as an interviewer. Or if you're a dose, you can be assigned that role. Or if you're the dose's designee, we can assign you that role. We have a lot of different roles that people can use. As a default, we're just using the same role that you had last year. So if there's doses on the line and you need to change some of your interviewers, let us know. If something's changed for you as an interviewer, you're doing a different school or something like that, make sure your dose sends us an email so that we can get the information adjusted correctly. And of course, if you're not seeing any students, let me know that too, because then obviously either something went wrong or you just don't have any students listed for your district or your school. In some cases, that might actually be legitimate. There might be some districts that don't have any students with IEPs that you need to follow up with, but I would imagine in most cases you would know that and probably not be on this call. Remember that in addition to interviewing former students, we also would like you to be a go-to person to direct them to any resources that might be available. And we've linked the resource manual online to the YOYO instrument. So make sure you are utilizing that and helping out people that used to be your students, even if they're not anymore. And there's also a supplemental manual available that can give you some even more specific information to your particular region that's available on our website. The big changes to the instrument this year are the majority of what I wanted to make you all aware of. There's not a lot of changes, but there are 4 new questions that have just been added. And the reason that they have been added is because the Office of Special Education Programs wants to use the same definition for competitive employment that WYOA is using. And that, of course, brings in the concept of competitive integrated employment. Now, they have told us kind of what they're looking for, and we as a team tried to come up with questions that were as easy to ask as possible and still maintain fidelity to the underlying concept that was there. But that's very difficult to do, because when you think about what we're really asking here, these are questions that a lot of people are not going to know the answers to. When you do the rest of the yo-yo, I've always stressed for the many years that we've been doing this that we really want you to record answers as the students say them. And I still want you to do that, but these questions are a little bit different in that regard, because the legitimate answer to a lot of these is probably going to be don't know. Let's look at what some of these questions are. The first one, as far as you know, do you work with people with and without disabilities? Well, what we're trying to get at there is hopefully pretty obvious. We are trying to ask the question about, are you working in an integrated setting? We want to be able to parse out those former students that might be working in a sheltered workshop or an enclave or something like that, where they only encounter other people with disabilities all day as their coworkers. So the question, do you work with people with and without disabilities? I mean, you could say, well, I don't know. There's hidden disabilities. I don't know if everybody I work with has a disability, or if nobody I work with has a disability. Maybe I'm the only person with a disability that works in my office. Think about what we're really trying to get at there. We're looking at whether it is an integrated environment. So, when you look at the answer options, which are definitely or probably yes, definitely or probably no or not, and don't know, unless all 4 of these questions are answered with one of the yeses, they're not going to be considered to be competitively employed. And that's a little bit scary from a data standpoint, because last year and most previous years, the number or the rate of competitive employment has hovered around 50%. And if all of a sudden these new questions are introduced and everybody writes don't know for any one of them, really, I mean, it can just be one, it doesn't have to be all 4, then they're going to drop out of that competitive employment figure. And it could look like our rate went from 50% to 5% really quickly. So think about what we're really asking here in addition to the way the question's worded. And if a student does say don't know, don't just immediately click the don't know box, but ask them some follow-up questions to kind of get a feel for what kind of job they're doing. When we ask, as far as do you get similar pay as your coworkers doing the same job? Again, this is the kind of thing where they probably know what their own pay is and know what kind of wage they're getting, but then you're asking them about their coworkers' pay, and the next question is about the coworkers' benefits. So we're assuming that they know their own pay, their own benefits, as well as their coworkers. They know what kind of job their coworkers are doing as to whether it's similar or not, and they're able to assess whether or not their pay and benefits are similar. That's a really tough question for a young person to answer. So I would err on the side of being pretty liberal when you assign answers to these, that if it seems like they're working in an integrated setting, if it seems like they have a job that it's not discriminating against them because of their disability in terms of pay or benefits, then I'd go with the probably yes option. And another thing to keep in mind there is when we ask, do you get some more benefits as your coworkers doing the same job? What we're really asking is, are you offered similar benefits as your coworkers doing the same job? Because remember, we're dealing with a population that may be offered benefits that they don't take because they may be still under their parents' health insurance plan. They may be getting public benefits. They may be on Medicaid, something like that. So their employer may actually be offering them something that they don't actually get, that they don't want. So keep that in mind, that it's what they're offered more than what they are actually receiving. And as far as getting some more opportunities for advancement as your coworkers, ask them if you think it's possible to get a raise, that kind of thing. And if they say no, ask them if you think it's possible that their coworkers get a raise. That's a tough question too. But we're required to ask something along those lines, and these are the best that we came up with. The next slide talks about some of the things that I just talked about. But do remember that they will not be considered to be competitively employed unless they answer yes to all 4 of those items. And I'm not asking anybody to make that up. There are some people that legitimately will not be a yes for all those items. We know that there are many people that are not in competitive integrated employment, but I don't want to miss anybody who really is competitively employed in an integrated setting because of the wording of the question. But we went around with our staff quite a bit and tried to come up with the best ways to ask these questions that we could, and these are the best that we came up with. If you have better suggestions for the future, by all means, let me know. We are open to entertaining any other thoughts, but this is pretty much what we need to use for this year because the instrument is ready to go. So do your best to determine if they meet the idea, the concept of being competitively employed in an integrative setting, and go with that for these questions. Probes are things I just wanted to touch on a little bit. The general probes, if someone's not understanding a question, get them talking. We want to keep it conversational. Ask them what they mean by that. If they say something that you're not really sure what they meant, or please tell me a little bit more about that. Anything that'll get them talking will give you more information, and it will help you know what answer choice to select. We've gone over the 10 years that we've been doing this, actually more than 10 years now, in a lot of different directions in terms of how we've constructed the instrument to where a lot of the questions were very open-ended and required a lot of text, and we've moved in a direction to where there are prescribed answer options that you choose from, which can make it more difficult because you can't just write down whatever they say. You have to kind of think a little bit, get them talking, and then understand, which box you're going to check or which boxes you're going to check on the instrument. Some specific probes regarding agencies and people. Remember, a lot of people put acronyms when it is an open-ended text box question. These can be very difficult for us. It takes a long time to go through open-ended questions anyway. So that's one of the reasons we've tried to limit them. We know what OVR is, but a lot of people put things like, Billy really benefited from the TLC program. Well, I don't know what the TLC program is. The person coding it doesn't know what that is. Maybe it's very common in your area, but we don't know. So spell it out, please. Tell us what it is. Tell us what it does, too. That gives us a lot more information than just saying what agency they used. And if you're talking about a person, again, please don't use their names. Not only does that violate confidentiality, potentially, I don't know who the people are. So if we want to, if for some reason it's really important information out there that we're missing, that guidance counselors are doing an excellent job at preparing former students for going to college, but not doing such a great job preparing them for careers, but no one actually says guidance counselors. They just use the names and say, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith or, something like that. Then we're going to miss that vital information and not be able to report that to the state and hopefully make some meaningful changes on that. So tell us the position that a person holds, not their name, and tell us what they did that was helpful too, and that will be very beneficial. A few more examples of specific probes. I think, when we ask the question, and it's an open-ended question, what do you do on most days? And someone says something like, well, I stay at home. Ask them what they're actually doing while they're staying at home. Maybe they're applying for jobs while they're staying at home. That's a pretty big difference between just sitting around and watching TV. Maybe they're spending time with their family. Maybe they're caring for a child at home. Maybe they're caring for another family member at home. Maybe they're doing volunteer work out of the house. Who knows? But the more you write about that, the more we will be able to give good information in the way that we report. Another example of a probe that we've run into in the past that I think would be really useful is to probe a little bit more deeply into the question about reasons for not working or pursuing post-secondary education. A lot of people say that the reason they're not doing this is because they have children. Okay, well, I think that's a very good point. That's a good thing to know. But is it an issue of childcare? Is it an issue of needing or wanting to stay at home with the child? Is the childcare available, but there's just not adequate funding for it? The more that we can find out about the actual situation, I think would be very beneficial to knowing how to address problems, or at least make some headway into addressing problems, because we all know there are very persistent problems out there, but any data that we can gather to help address them, I think, is very useful. Okay, I'm going to go on to the website. I think that would be saying my desktop. So I'm just going to show you a few quick things, a few reminders. I don't think I went over this earlier to the extent that I meant to, but when you do look through your list of students, if you need to add, if you need to delete students, and first of all, to try to really make sure that they do fit the parameters of who should or should not be in the YOYO. If they have dropped out, then they do belong in the YOYO. If they've dropped out during the 2017-18 school year, and that includes just not showing up for school. They would be considered a dropout. That includes someone that says they were going to transfer to another school but then didn't, if they never enrolled there. And if students are just missing from your list that had IEPs in place and exited during the 17-18 school year from your district, then they need to be added. The way you do that, don't send me an email, please. Send a secure file, because it's a lot more secure. To send a secure file, click here. That'll take you to something that looks like a Qualtrics survey, but it will allow you to upload a file, and that's the way we recommend it. Take a screenshot of their Infinite Campus Enrollment tab. Most of the time, what happens is a student exited school either by receiving an alternate diploma or dropping out, and then they re-enrolled the next year. KDE didn't get this information in time, or they didn't process it in time, something like that. So we'll need to remove them from the survey because they would not have been considered to have exited and wouldn't be eligible for the YOYO because they're back in school. So if you take a Infinite Campus screenshot, upload it there, we'll take them off. A lot of times what the screenshot will say is that they moved to another district. Those are the ones that I have to run by KDE, but I will do that, and when I hear from them, I will act as KDE tells me we need to act. And if you need to add students, they can be found. I'm going to go over here to resources. Copy of fields to add students. You download that. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Add all the students with the information that's required on it. Upload it to the site, and I'll get them added right away. Right above that is the former student letter. You can, like I say, modify that however you want, personalize it, and get it out to students. So those are some good resources to use. If you're familiar with our KyPSO website or our HDI's website, there are a lot of really good other resources that you can look at. So I'm going to click on, actually let me back up just so you saw where that was, because the title's a little bit different. Data collection and reporting, we call it now. I think in the past it was just data collection, but data collection and reporting, because all of our reports come from this site too. So hopefully you all are working with your doses. Maybe some of you are doses. We encourage them to involve you in the process of looking at reports and finding out what we're seeing from previous years. And there's a really good reporting system that is available to them or anyone they designate as their designee, because that's a little redundant, from this site as well. So this is where we go, not just for data collection, but for anyone to view their reports. So I'm going to log in. Actually, I'm not going to log in as an administrator. I'm going to log in as a Tony. All right, and because I have my test account set up, you can see if you're a DOS or a DOS's designee, you can see the reports button right there. You can list your interviewers, so that'll list everybody who's an interviewer in your district if you want to be able to monitor them and see what kind of credentials they have. I mean, maybe someone was an interviewer 5 years ago and we never took them off the list. That might be good for you to know, and you can just drop Judy or myself a line and say, hey, remove these 3 people. They're not interviewers anymore. We don't even know who they are. We will do that because we like to keep the interviewer list as clean as possible. This is where you'll see the list of students. So looking down at the list of students, you'll probably remember how this looks. We've got the student ID number over here on the left, their name, their school, and the status, which will always be either not started, open, or submitted. Open just means that it's been saved in process somewhere. Submitted means it's been submitted. Even if it means that you couldn't contact the former student, then you couldn't contact them, and that's how it was submitted. Every month I will send out a more detailed list to all of the doses that we have on file, letting them know the more detailed status of how many interviews were completed, how many weren't able to be contacted, how many refused, how many haven't been started yet, that kind of thing. Let's go through a fake interview here, and let's do Sloan Peterson from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, who has not been started yet. Remember, you can open your resource manual. I did that. It popped right up, and just minimize it at the bottom of my screen. It'll probably set off a pop-up blocker unless you have that turned off, so be aware of that. See some information about Sloan here. We can see her gender and ethnicity and her disability category, so you'll know a little bit more about who you're talking to. Try to remember something personal about them so that you can have a conversation with them. This is the same as I think it ever always has been. You can record any notes up here about times that you tried to contact whoever it is that you're trying to contact. If you can't contact them, just click could not contact, and you can submit it like that. And we'll assume for this one that you can. Do remind them when you get them on the phone. You don't have to read this script exactly, but make sure that they know it's not going to affect their benefits. It's not going to affect their SSI. We're not in contact with the Social Security Administration or anything like that. And hopefully that'll make them a little more comfortable answering these questions. So I'm going to click proceed, and we're trying to get a hold of Sloan Peterson. Let's say that it was we can get a hold of her, but we got a hold of Sloan's father. And you can see what I wrote there before. When we do that, it pops up and asks why, and we'll just say that the answer was Sloan was out. Oh, I click next. Remember that the link to the Disability Resource Manual is at the top, and there's also a section in the supplemental YOYO resources. So we asked the residents question, where do you live for most of last year? And let's say that our father says at the family home. And let's remember you can save at any point during the interview, so I'll do that. Get the little pop-up button reminding me that it has been saved. Go on to the next. Since the time you left high school, have you ever had a paying job? We'll say yes and go on to the next page. This is the same as it was last year. Have you worked for at least 90 days? Yes. How many hours do you usually work? This was new last year. This is the second year of this, I think. We used to just ask if it was less than 20 or 20 or above, because that's actually the definition that OSEP is looking for in terms of competitive employment, being 20 or more hours per week. But a lot of people had asked us about full-time employment, and we say, we don't really have a measure of full-time employment because, if someone was just working 20 hours, most people wouldn't consider that full time. So we wanted to be able to drill down a little bit further and look at this more in depth. So we added this question. So I'm going to choose the middle one. Let's say that she said, or her father said that she was working, about 25 to 30 hours per week. It varies. And so we'll choose in the middle, paid at least minimum wage. Say that he says yes. And which, if any of the following supports or accommodations did Sloan receive at her job? This is the check all that apply item. You can remember that. A good kind of cheat sheet is that when these buttons are square, they're check all that apply. When they're round, you can only check one. And if it's a check all that apply, it's also a check none that apply. So if none of them apply, you don't have to check any of them. If they all apply, you can choose all of them. Let's say that her father said, no, she doesn't really use a job coach or anything like that. She doesn't need a personal aid or assistant. As far as any special equipment, Sloan doesn't use anything like that, so I'm not going to check any of them. Are you still working? Of course, we're talking to a parent, so we would say, is she still working? And say yes, still is. Rolling down. And how interesting does Sloan find her job? Let's say she finds it somewhat interesting. I'll click next. Now these are the new questions that I harped on for so long. So we'll ask Mr. Peterson. So as far as you know, does Sloan work with people with and without disabilities? And let's say he says, I don't know. She works at the counter at Macy's. I don't know if her coworkers have disabilities or not. Well, being an astute interviewer, I would probably say, oh, well, Macy's, okay, I kind of know what that is she's working at the counter. That seems like a pretty regular job. It seems like it's an integrated setting. I'm going to go with probably yes. As far as you know, does Sloan get similar pay as her coworkers that are doing the same job? Again, he says, well, how am I supposed to know that? She doesn't even like to talk to me about her pay. And I sure don't know what her coworkers are getting. You say, well, does she ever say when she comes home that she feels like she's been discriminated against in some way because remember she had a disability as listed on her IEP? Is that holding her back in any way from getting the same kind of pay as her coworkers? Oh, well, I've never heard anything about those kind of particular complaints. As an interviewer, I'd probably go with probably yes. So, as far as you know, does Sloan get similar benefits as her coworkers doing the same job? He said, well, they don't offer benefits, really. She's not working 40 hours a week. So, no, she doesn't get any benefits. And you say, well, do her coworkers that are doing the same job get benefits? Well, I don't know what's going on with her coworkers, but everything she tells me is that Macy's doesn't offer benefits. I'm just making this up. I don't know Macy's policy. But if that's the case, it does seem like she's getting similar benefits because nobody is getting any benefits. So I'd probably even go with definitely yes on that one. As far as you know, does she get similar opportunities for advancement as her coworkers doing the same job? He says, well, I sure hope my daughter is not going to be working the same job for the rest of her life. I hope she doesn't think she's going to be advancing there for the next 40 years. You say, well, yes, but what do you think about would she have that opportunity if that's what she chooses? Is the fact that she has some form of disability or had one in the past, is that going to prohibit her from getting the same kind of opportunities that other people who work there are going to get? And my guess, you would probably say, now she'll get the same opportunities as everybody does. I just hope she doesn't take them. So I'd go with a probably yes there. So let me know if that's really the way the conversations go. I don't know. I'm trying to guess how a conversation like that would go, and that's my best guess. So, now this comes up because remember we answered that she was working between 20 and 37.5 hours per week. So the question comes up: what is the main reason that you are not working or not working more hours? And let's say she travels a lot too. So type that in. From the time you left high school until now, have you been in any type of school or training program? Let's say that her father says that no, Sloan has not done that, much to his dismay. In fact, she even ditched high school quite a bit. There, little joke for any Ferris Bueller fans out there. What would you say the main reason is that you did not go on to post-secondary education? And let's say that her father says that Mr. Jones did not encourage her enough to look into post-secondary ed. And you, being the astute interviewer again, remembered what Tony said during the webinar. And said, oh, I'm not supposed to write Mr. Jones. So who was Mr. Jones, you might say? And Mr. Peterson might say, oh, he was the guidance counselor. So we might write in something like, not enough encourage that gives us some pretty good information, I think. Okay, I click next to go on to the question about community. Do you have a driver's license? Does Sloan have a driver's license? Maybe he would say yes at this point. Is she registered to vote? I don't know if she is or not. I think she probably is, so go with yes. The most important thing during high school that helped Sloan in her life right now, whatever she puts. Again, remembering not listing people's names or their agencies, but kind of what those things were, what they did for her. I'm not even going to fill that out. Since leaving high school, has Sloan had any contact with the counselor from Voc Rehab? Let's say he says, well, she did talk to somebody. I don't really know who they were. It was somebody asking if she needed any help with transportation to her job. I don't know if that was Voc Rehab or not. Well, we all know that Voc Rehab is the gatekeeper to a lot of services. So as an interviewer, I would probably say, well, I think that's probably a yes, because that's who it would probably be that helped with transportation things. And of course, a parent doesn't know firsthand. The student might not even know it firsthand. But then, he said yes, so describe the kind of help that you were getting. And maybe he would say the transportation was offered, not. So you see how that kind of tells us the whole story, or quite a bit of the story anyway. So I'll click next. This last question of the interview, is there anything you want to add? So Sloan's father can answer whatever he wants to there. As I think I've mentioned for quite a few years now, we put the name and the contact information for the transition consultant from the special ed co-op in the box there. I put my name for this fake student, but you would have the real name in your region. So of course there's 9 special ed co-ops throughout the state, and you can you'll have your own information there. And then interviewer comments, if there's something that you want to relate to us about the interview itself, you can do so there. I'm just going to save it one more time because, hey, I always want to save things. And I click OK, and then I will click next. Oops. And it asks, just what information was shared with the respondent. And let's say that I did share that transition consultant's information, but that was about it. I didn't really share anything else. Remember, these are squares, not radio buttons, or not round radio buttons anyway. So they are check all that apply. You can check as many as you want. If you can get your arrow in the box, which I just finally did, thank you. I'll just check that, and then I will submit it. And I'll look back at my list of students, and I will see that Sloan Peterson has now been submitted. So that is pretty much all there is to it, with the exception of the occasional difficulty of contacting students and getting them to agree to be interviewed and engage in a conversational interview that gives you answers that we will be able to use. So that's all I really have today. I'm going to stop presenting. That was a pretty quick one, so hopefully I haven't taken up too much of your time. Do remember that what, of course, you need to do is to retake the quiz. If you have changes in your status, have your DOS email us with what they want your status to be as far as being an interviewer. being an assistant to the DOS as far as having access to reports and being able to list interviewers. And if you forget your username or anything, contact either Judy or myself. So you are free to go if you want. If you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask them, and I'll hang out here on the line for a few minutes.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.